So from module 1 up to now, we have been focusing on revenue. But here's the problem. Revenue alone doesn't help us make better decisions. We need to use more specific performance indicators to get to these decisions. And that is why this video will introduce to you a new performance metric that will help us with this. Occupancy. Occupancy is defined as the number of rooms that a hotel sells in a period of time. Just like how a jeans business wants to know how many of its jeans people are buying, or how a water bottle company wants to know how many of its bottles people are drinking, a hotel needs to know how many of its rooms are getting occupied by its customers. So when we look at this in more general business terms, occupancy is also defined as volume. It's the quantity of units that a business has sold. And the big idea is that this metric is going to give us a better understanding of the revenue performance that we have been seeing. But this takes us to the biggest misconception about a hotel's occupancy. Even though higher occupancies generally correlate with higher revenues, it should never be the goal to try to maximize occupancy. So exercise 2 has 2 steps. We are going to first determine the number of rooms sold at the hotel for each of these given dates, and then we will apply this formula to get the occupancy percentage, which is the number of rooms sold divided by the number of rooms available at the hotel. Now this is where it gets tricky, because for step 1, notice how the data is different from what we have been using before. This is a guest database that tells us every single reservation that has ever touched this hotel. Now I want you to focus on these 3 columns: status, arrival dates, and departure dates. When we look at status, out of all of these different options, what do you think it tells us the number of rooms sold?
Checked out.
Checked out, exactly. And why?
Because canceled, they never came. And no-show, well, they also never came.
So with step 1, we're going to use a new formula known as the countifs, which is just like the sumifs, but we're not adding any numbers. Instead, we're going to be counting the number of rows in this data that fit with the criteria we set. And so the first criteria, as you said, is going to be checkouts, because this status indicates that the reservation has been actually sold. But this takes us to the other 2 columns, because we also need to make sure that the countifs is counting these rows for the appropriate dates. Obviously, this reservation right here is not going to be counted for June 1st, because the arrival and departure dates don't match it. So the most difficult part to this exercise is to figure out how to set the criteria for the dates. It's difficult because we're dealing with 2 dates, the arrival and departure dates. So to properly set the criteria for this, we're going to apply the same method that you used in exercise 1. In the previous exercise, you learned how to set ranges. And just like how you did it before, we need to figure out how to define these boundaries. So the first boundary in our range is going to start with the arrival dates. In order to be counted as occupancy on June 1st, a reservation needs to have checked in on or before June 1st. We would tell Excel that the arrival dates has to be less than or equal to June 1st. Looking at these 3 example reservations, this reservation does not arrive until July, so it's not going to be counted, but these reservations will be counted because they arrived on and before June 1st. Now, this takes us to our next boundary, which takes into account the departure dates. Because if we do not set this, take a look at Mr. Hamilton. His reservation is accepted by the first boundary, and that's good, but notice how he checked out in April. This is definitely less than June 1st, and he should not be counted. So with this second boundary, the logic is that Excel only counts reservations with departure dates that are greater than June 1st. And as a result, out of these 3 reservations, Excel is only going to count Ms. Hawes as occupancy for June 1st. She's the only one that satisfies both these boundaries. So let's create the formula. Equals countifs. Now notice how it doesn't give you the instructions for sum range. It skips that and goes straight to the criteria range because we're not adding amounts, we're just counting the number of rows. So the first criteria is that cells within column D would need to have statuses set as checked out. And for the second criteria, this is where we set our first range. So all of the cells within this column, the arrival dates would need to be less than or equal to June 1st. Now, instead of typing June 1st, I'm just going to select the cell location. Why is that?
That way we can just copy and paste the formula.
Now, is our formula done?
No, we need the
second boundary, right? So we would select this column, and all of the cells within this column needs to be greater than not equal to the given dates. Now, why is it that the departure dates cannot be equal to the given dates?
Because we're looking at checked out.
That's right, because hotel guests need to leave in the morning. And as a result, they would not be staying the night of their departure dates. Perfect. So the number of rooms booked comes out to 60. With this number, it would be divided by the total number of rooms at the hotel, and we would be able to get the occupancy. Now, previously in this video, I stated that it should never be the goal for a hotel to maximize occupancy. And I'm going to show you what I mean by this. So we are going to create a competitor index for June's occupancy. Using our index formula that you just learned, we divide the hotel's metric, which in this case is occupancy, not RevPAR, by the competitor's occupancy, and the number comes out to 127. Now, if we ignored everything else and we focused on only this occupancy index, this sounds incredible. All our customers are choosing to book the rooms at our hotel and not at the competitors' hotels. But now, if we go back to the RevPAR indexes from exercise 1, and you look at June's index, we are still getting B in June with a 99 index in RevPAR. So in the next video, we're going to talk about the missing link that explains what is going on here so that we can help this hotel make better decisions.